Satsang with our spiritual guides and leaders, and with each other. Help us to open up to your light, that we may be able to see your light shining within us all through this new year, and that we may be able to share your light with all sincere spiritual seekers and with all those who need it. We are your children. Be with us. Om Shanti Shanti. Amen. So welcome in the Temple of Light at Ananda Sisi. I'm Darshan, and I'm also welcoming you on behalf of our spiritual directors, Anand and Kirtani, and on behalf of the whole community here, Ananda Sisi. This is a very, very special occasion. We've had a long, wonderful Christmas season, which we have named the Light of Hope. And it is our hope that during this season, seeds of hope have been planted in all hearts, and that these seeds may sprout and grow during this new year into plants of divine realization. And the special occasion is the presence of Nayaswami's Jyotish and Devi. Jyotish is, they are the spiritual directors of Ananda worldwide. Normally they travel, but in reality they're still traveling because they have been giving satsangs all over the world. I know they've been all over the United States and in India. And so Jyotish is the spiritual successor to Swami Kriyananda, and he and his wife Devi have been for many years giving guidance, inspiration, friendship, satsang, and love to this wonderful, great family. And so we are very grateful to have you and to also end this spiritual campaign of the Light of Hope with your satsang.
Okay. Well, we can't tell you how happy it makes us to be with you today. And more than just how happy it makes us, how happy it must make Master, who came with a world mission to unite people everywhere. And here we gather together as his children from Italy and Serbia, Germany, Spain, Russia, America, and maybe other countries I don't know. But this was his mission. And yesterday, as we know, we celebrated his birthday. And maybe this is our belated birthday present to him, to say, Master, look, we as your children can live together in harmony and support and inspiration and friendship and forgiveness. And this is how the world will be healed. And Master was the beacon bearer, the flag bearer to show a new way of life. And we are all his soldiers by following in his great footsteps. And we are so blessed to have this opportunity in this lifetime. So we also want to congratulate you on your Light of Hope campaign. What a wonderful thing to do, particularly at this time in the world where people are clinging to hope. It's a fragile, very fragile flower, the flower of hope. And we are watering it with our devotion, with our commitment to spiritual values, and God willing, this flower of hope that you've watered during this campaign, the light of hope, will grow stronger and stronger, and that it won't merely be an affirmation, but the hope we have for a unified world where every soul is respected, every soul has the opportunity to rise in the world according to their own karma, but nothing societal holding them back. And most important of all, that each one of us can see the light of God in each other and in the world around us. So I'll give a bit of a discourse, but Jyotish, do you want to add some thoughts before?
Yes, maybe before we dive into the subject, I too want to add my congratulations to, the program that you've been undergoing, but more than that, the extraordinary togetherness that has happened in spite of the conditions that the whole world has been facing. There are forces at play trying to push us apart, to divide us, to force us into isolation, to force us into distrust, and even to the point where there are lockdowns where people are unable to leave their homes. And yet, in spite of that, the ability, not only technologically, which is wonderful, but more than that, unless there were the desire to be together, to function together, to come together, to increase the light within each one of us and the light in the world, unless there was that desire, all the technology in the world wouldn't help. But because there is that desire, this, not only in Europe, but in Ananda around the world, this has been actually quite an extraordinary year of growth in the numbers of people and growth in the connections that have happened. And it's a very both beautiful and surprising thing to watch happen. But I think this will now begin to form a new normal for us, in the sense that from now on, I think we will end up with a hybrid of coming together in a personal way, visiting the Assisi community and temple. Certainly Devi and I hope to do that this coming August. We'll see if that's possible. But not only the coming together physically, but I think it will continue to be a time where we broadcast, we stream all of our programs, so that those who can't travel, those who may not have the money to travel, those who don't have the opportunity or the time to make a physical visit, still have the opportunity to join in as part of the Ananda family. I think that's going to be the new normal for Ananda around the world. And I just want to acknowledge the fact that probably as much as anywhere in the world of Ananda, all of you in Europe are modeling that new paradigm for us. So at any rate, we'll now kind of dive into the subject of the light within and letting that shine. And Devi will start. And we'll move this so that.
Okay. There we go. Okay, so first of all, welcome to our home. We are speaking to you from our living room. And just as Vinay and Julian were singing from their home, which Darshan said was 5 minutes from the temple. Well, we're less than 5 minutes from the temple of light in Assisi. We're just a thought away. So we travel with our thoughts at the speed of light, and we are there with you. And so here we are at Ananda Village, Master's first successful World Brotherhood community. And all of you are part of that community. I noticed that it was also our satsang is being translated into Portuguese. So welcome to our Portuguese speakers. So our topic, Thy Light Within Us Shining. Of course, this is the title of one of Swamiji's beautiful songs that we sing during the Festival of Light from the Oratorium. But what does that mean, thy light within us shining? God's light, God's energy, God's consciousness is what illumines each one of us. And Master used to sometimes look at his disciples and say, if you only knew how beautiful you are, I see you all as beings of light. And that's how he saw us, because he saw the divine light shining within each soul he met. You know, there was a story, perhaps you've heard from the early years of Ananda Village. This was probably 1970 or 69 or 70. And there was, in the nearby town of Nevada City, there was a petrol station there. And the man who ran it was always very, very grumpy. He just seemed that life did not please him, and he was rude and abrupt, and no one liked going there, but it was our only option. But one day, two of our young members drove one of the big agricultural trucks into town to fill up the tanks. And they had a picture of Master, little, wallet-sized picture on the dashboard. And the grumpy man came up and he said, "What do you want?" And then he saw the picture of Master on the dashboard. And he just stopped. And he said, "Who is that?" And his eyes began filling up with tears. And he said, and they said, "That's Paramahansa Yogananda, our guru." And he said, "I used to have a petrol station in Los Angeles at the foot of Mount Washington. And I didn't know who he was, but that man would come down frequently to get gasoline for his car. He was the kindest man I ever met." How does a miracle like that happen? That a heart that's encrusted with bitterness and resentment and probably disappointment and grievances, but still the light of the divine beings can reach into that heart and awaken a higher consciousness within that man. Well, if Master could do that for a man who didn't even know who he was, what more can he do for each of us who are reaching out to him in as many ways with as much focus and effort as we can to draw that light? The story is one of incredible hope for all of us. Not only that we can draw that light, but that we can be channels for that light, the light of hope, into a world that is so desperately needing it right now. But how do we draw that light? How do we connect with that light, the divine light shining within us, ever more strongly, so that it becomes, perhaps in the beginning, when we begin on the spiritual path, we can think of our spiritual journey. Maybe we're in a little bitty raft and we're kind of paddling it, and it's a very weak little current, little stream that we're moving down. But then the more we paddle, our little raft with our oars of devotion and commitment and self-offering, what happens? That stream begins to gather momentum. More waters begin to flow into it, and that stream becomes a stronger current. And then we find we're in a canoe and we're in a river and we're paddling, but that current is carrying us more and more strongly. And then what happens? Then we're moving into a great broad river, and now we have a boat with a motor, and we're moving along with great speed. And then finally, that current merges into the ocean of spirit. And then perhaps we're not riding on a boat anymore. Perhaps we're just soaring in the light with our guru. But this is the process. At first slow, with effort, without much results. But then what happens? Our own sincerity draws, magnetically draws the energy, the divine light of Master and of our line of gurus. And then that current begins carrying us. And then we also look around and we see there are many currents, our guru bhais are floating, moving more and more rapidly. I see Shivani joined us this morning. I don't know if others are there, but Shivani and I were there at the very first summer of Ananda, 1969, working in the garden. And it's just such a joy to have journeyed this life together and watch all of our boats moving closer and closer into that great ocean of spirit. And this will happen for all of us, for all of us. Some of you, I see Gabriella, Ricky, we have known you from the beginning of Ananda's work in Italy, and so many of you, Darshan too, from the beginning. So it's so heartwarming to see we are still moving our boats. Our God is moving our boats closer and closer to the great ocean of spirit. But what can we do to facilitate, to make this journey, give it more power and energy? How can we illumine the divine light within us with more power? Well, let's talk about different areas of our life. First, let's talk about our health, our physical well-being. Because right now, as we know, the world is going through a tremendous challenge with the pandemic. But we can develop an aura around us using Master's techniques that will protect us. Because remember, what are we in essence? We are not the physical body. We are energy and light. And what all of Master's techniques for the physical body, diet, exercise, and so forth, they're all dealing with the prana, with the energy. And that we have under our control. We can't necessarily control outer things, but we can work with that divine energy no matter what. And of course, we have the wonderful tools, the energization exercises. And I, with great shame, admit, bearing my breast in confession, that for many years, I did not do them regularly. I kind of thought, oh, I'm young, I'm strong, I don't need to do these. But then as time went by and I meditated more and I attuned to the guru more, I realized this isn't about physical vitality only, because I felt I didn't need it. This is about learning to draw prana into your body for all aspects of healing, even for healing others. I remember we have a grown son, but when he was, probably about 8 years old, he was playing with his friends, fell out of a tree, broke his arm rather badly. And by this time, I was doing the energization more regularly, and I could feel that flow of prana, and I could use it. And I remember the night after he broke his arm, he was in a great deal of pain. and he couldn't sleep and he was crying. And I didn't know what to do for him to help him. His arm was in a cast. But I remember I just thought, all right, Master, let's work with prana. And I put my hands on his cast. And just as Master teaches with the energization exercises, I felt the energy coming in through the medulla and tensing, relaxing, sending it to that poor little broken arm. And after a few minutes, I said, do you feel anything? And he said, yes, Mommy, I feel, so sweet, I feel the good energy coming in and the bad energy going out. And immediately he fell into a deep sleep and he slept all day. And from then on, the healing went very nicely. But really, that's what he summed it up in his childlike innocence. We draw the good energy in and we push the bad energy away. And that's what illness is. It's just energy that is not in harmony with the divine will of God. And so we can do this with the energization. We can draw that energy, the prana, the light, it through the energization, through Ananda Yoga. Even if you do, and believe me, everything that we're talking about, it's not just what we've read, it's what Jyotish and I do in our life. Do even a little bit of Ananda Yoga every day. Our regime is we get up, we energize, we do 10 or 15 minutes of Ananda Yoga. And then we Jyoti or Mahamudra for those of you who are Kriyamans, and then we meditate. And it just keeps the body, keeps the prana flowing in the body. And then when you sit to meditate, you're already living in the more in the astral plane, in the realm of light. And it's easier to meditate then. And then also to augment these things with a diet filled with prana. As Master recommended, he has so many teachings about diet. But just simply put, I mean, it's a fabulous study, but simply put, to eat foods that are vital, whole grains, raw and lightly cooked vegetables, not too much spices. And then again, he recommends, and we recommend, because we've been doing it for some time now, once a week fasting on orange juice. It just resets the body. At first, it was difficult. We've been doing this now for about a year and a half. Every Thursday we fast. If we can't, if there's a commitment on Thursday, we can't, then we do it another day. At first it was hard, but honestly, now I look forward to Thursdays because I can just feel it resets my body. And then I have more energy for the rest of the week. So all of these are ways on a physical level for our prana to draw the divine light within us, to draw in the good energy and push out the bad energy. Now, in the area of more activity of our service, how do we draw more God's light within us into our service? Well, remember that it's not important what we do. It's important how we do it, the consciousness with which we do it. And, you know, in the early years of Ananda, as I mentioned, Shivani and Kirtani later also joined us, Jaya, Sadhana Devi. We all worked in the garden. It wasn't glorious work, but it was glorious work for us because we loved it. We loved working with the plants and the soil and making wonderful, rejuvenating for the soil compost piles. And we felt we gave it everything we had. We did it with concentration, dedication, and joy. So whatever you do, really, it doesn't matter. But if you do it with those qualities of concentration, self-offering, and joy, then you're drawing that light into whatever you do. You know, Jyotish has a wonderful pastime, which most of you are familiar with, in which he loves to paint. In fact, behind me, I'll move. There's one of his beautiful paintings. And this was done some years ago. And I know you can't see it very clearly. Let's see, I'll get out of the way. It's a little too distant. But it shows Master holding a beacon of hope and light, sailing across a very stormy sea. And it's called Pole Star, after the chant, I have made thee pole star of my life. And Jyotish painted it for an art exhibit, but then when we hung it on our wall, we said, oh no, we can't give this away. This is so representative of our life. But when Jyotish paints, it's really a form of deep self-offering and concentration. And it's wonderful. He has a little studio just past where we're sitting. And when he's painting, the whole house is filled with light and stillness, because that's the spirit in which he's doing it. He's doing it with concentration, self-forgetfulness, self-offering, and joy. And so whatever you do, and get rid of unwillingness. You know, unwillingness kills our energy. Yesterday, we had a busy day, and I knew we wouldn't have time to have a meal, a nice meal, but I just made the time, and I made a nice dinner for us that we would have when we got home at the end of the day. And at first I was like, oh, I don't want to cook this. I want to just relax. But then I thought, no, willingness. And I just put my energy into it. And by the end, I felt so happy. And we came home from Master's birthday celebration in the evening. We had a lovely meal ready for us and filled with light and willingness and joy. So look at your service. Even if you're working in an office, if you're working in a hospital, where, you know, there are many difficult positions now that need to be fulfilled. But nevertheless, willingness, joy, concentration, self-offering, these will transform your life and transform your service. Now, what about our attitudes and our emotional life? We can even talk about our relationships with other people. Attitudes can be brought under our conscious control. Moods are not, we do not need to be afflicted by moods. So often I'll be working with a friend who has problems with moods, and you just see how sometimes you just want to say, put out more energy than the mood. The mood is your enemy. It's not what this person did or what that person said, but it's your response to become moody. That's your enemy. And so when things happen that are difficult, and many of you have heard this story, it's one of my favorites from memories of my life, when Ananda was stricken by the forest fire in 1976, and you know, the community was burnt to the ground, and Jyotish and I lost virtually everything we had. There was a moment where I didn't know if I was separated from Jyotish. We had just had, physically, not in a marriage, and we had just had a child. Our son was just 11 days old. And I didn't know if Jyotish I didn't know if he was alive or not, because everyone was separated on this big piece of property, and the fire was just moving through it like out of control. But then at a certain point, I saw, and someone came running up to me and said, your house burned down, you've lost everything. And I was sort of stunned. And this was interesting. And again, I admit this not with humility. For a moment, I felt my mental balance slipping. And it was like it was more than I could deal with. And then I looked at this newborn child that I was holding, and I just took control of my consciousness, of my mood. And I brought light into it. And I said, no, you do not have the luxury to check out right now. And I just collected my thoughts, collected my energy. I was present. And then I saw Jyotish walking down the hill, and I knew he was safe. And I didn't want him to be worried for me, and he didn't want me to be worried. So we consciously choosing to live in the light. He looked at me and with a big smile on his face, and he said, we don't have to worry about those problems with leaks anymore, because our house leaked quite badly. And we both burst out laughing. And in that moment, I knew that everything was going to be fine, because we had conquered the downward pulling energy that would come into self-pity and grieving and despair and loss. We thought whatever we need, we can find it by concentrating on the light within us. And so it proved. And now here we are, these many years later, and we have many good stories to tell. But it was a gift. And I want to, again, say to each of you as friends and Guru Bhais, whatever the world is going through now, we have a choice of how we respond to it. We can see it through the eyes of God. We can see it, the light behind it all, or we can be defeated by it. It's our choice. And the more we draw that light within us, the more we become spiritual conquerors, victors, like Arjuna in Mahabharata and Bhagavad Gita. So, and also with our emotions, in dealing with other people, try to see the best in them, no matter how difficult they are. You know, sometimes in communities or in working with staff, I see Prem Jyoti, who works with the school and so forth. Maybe you'll have somebody a coworker who is difficult to deal with, or a parent that's difficult, or somebody that a colleague, whatever it might be, or a family member. People thrive when they feel loved and accepted, no matter how difficult they are. There's a story, true story, that a friend of ours who's a doctor told us. And this took place during her residency, when she was not a full practicing physician yet. This was a few years ago. And she was working in an emergency room. And she heard all this commotion outside coming in from the street. And the police were bringing in this man who was just totally drunk. And in his drunkenness, he had fallen down and broken his arm. And so he was in a lot of pain, but he was violent, and they were having to try to control him. And they brought him in, and they said to her, "Oh, lady, you can't deal with this man." And she said, she was a Kriyaban. She said, "Oh, yes, I can." Bring him into the examining room. And they said, "We'll stay with you because he's out of control." She said, no, you don't need to stay with me." And they brought him in. And because she knew these teachings, she just projected light to him. "You are a child of God. And I am here to help you." And little by little, without any, shots or medication, the man began to calm down. And then tears came into his eyes because he knew he was safe. And he looked at her and he said, "Will you be my doctor?" Just meaning, can you help me? And she said, "Yes, I will help you." And she was able to set his arm, and, and he was able to get out of that. Well, that's of that violent, drunken stupor and the pain. And so how did she do that? She saw the light in him. She saw him as a child of God. And we can do this all the time. It doesn't matter if it doesn't mean You ignore the fact that someone's acting in a way that is difficult, but you don't let that define them. You see their higher nature. Swami did this with us all the time. Believe me, I don't think any of us who were first generation here perhaps would still be on the path if Swami hadn't used extraordinary patience and acceptance and forgiveness for each of us. And so we can do that. And then finally, and then Jyotish will speak when I'm done here, and then we'll have questions as well. How do we bring more light into our spiritual life and into our sadhana? Well, I think remember that God's light is not far away. His love is not far away. Remember that our desire to feel God's love, to experience his light, that doesn't originate with us. That's the divine, the Guru calling us, come back to my light, unite with my love. And so when you sit to meditate, yes, we need self-discipline. Yes, we need to be determined and use willpower. But over and above that, try to remember that that light and that love is your own true essence. Relax into it. Swami has a beautiful quote from Secrets of Meditation, that his little book. And he says, remember that when you meditate, that is your true state. It's not something, it's not a foreign language. It's your mother tongue that you speak naturally. And so, yes, do the techniques, of course, don't ignore them. But after you do the techniques, relax and feel that light, feel that love, and know that you are always a part of that. It is always a part of you, and that is your home. Sometimes Jyotish and I get very busy, a lot of demands on us, but then we just know that our home is when we get centered within, and that's what keeps us going. We just the ability to return to that center of light within us that's always shining, that's always accessible. It's not something that some people have and some people don't have, that some are worthy and some are unworthy. We're all worthy in God's eyes. As it says in the festival, even the worst of sinners will by steadfast meditation speedily comes to me. So let's remember in our sadhana to never get up, never leave your meditation seat until you feel that light as a part of you. And then to share that light in prayer as you conclude your meditation, and then throughout the day with everyone that you meet. How did St. Francis be able to draw the little birds that landed on all over him? Because he felt his oneness with them in the light. And so we too can make everyone feel that they are loved and they are God's child by sharing the light that we have with humility and self-offering and dedication awakened within our own hearts. So God bless you all. And now we'll turn it over to Jyotish. I will disappear from the scene.
We have a very low-tech way of changing the scene. We simply move the computer and do it that way. So, this subject of light and the light within us is something that Master talked about a lot. He had a whole chapter in the autobiography of a yogi dedicated to it, and he called it the Law of Miracles. And on a physical level, it's helpful to understand that our senses look out and they see a tree, or they see a bird, or they see whatever is in front of us. And it's very natural to just accept that. Or they hear a sound. You're hearing now the sound of my voice. And whatever language it's being translated into, the words that I'm saying make some sense to you. You understand the concepts that I'm talking about. And so we just accept that as if, oh yes, that's what it is. But it's actually extraordinary. You know, the sound of my voice is just one of many, many sounds that are there in your room at this moment. And all it is vibration. It's wavelengths. It's vibration of air. And it's your consciousness that makes sense out of all those vibrations. So we live in a sea of vibration. And as that sound of my voice, as if you take that wavelength, which is about a meter long, a note, I think A above middle C is a note of about a meter long. If you make that a billion times shorter, so that same vibration, same wavelength, it's no longer sound, it's light, it's the color red. And so sound is a longer wavelength. As it gets shorter, it turns into light, but it's all vibration. And what Master's talking about is that if we realize that this whole world is simply made up of vibration, it's almost a misnomer to talk about trying to draw the light. How do you draw something that you are already? We're nothing else but vibration. We're nothing else but a projection of the vibration. In the scriptures, it's called Om or Amen, but it's an attempt to capture the fact that the very creation of this physical world is dependent upon vibration. And that vibration can be heard, it can be seen, it can be felt as various qualities of God. And so, as I said, Master devotes a whole chapter in the autobiography of a yogi, the law of miracles. And essentially, one of the teachings of Einstein, discoveries of Einstein, is that as you take an object mass and you move it faster and faster and faster toward the speed of light, first of all, time changes. So if you were on a spaceship moving at a fraction of the speed of light, and then you circled around and you came back to Earth, everybody else would have aged more than you did because of the way the universe works. But more than that, if you could ever, it would take an infinite amount of energy to push even an atom or an object up toward the speed of light. And so Master says, turns it on its head, says basically, if you approach the speed of light, you become more and more infinite. And if you achieve the speed of light, you are infinite. And therefore, all miracles depend upon understanding that you're light, that you're already traveling at the speed of light, because that's who you are, what you are. And so the masters live in the awareness that they're made up of vibration and out of light. But the vibration is not just, we think of light as just a physical element, but the light of God is conscious. And so it's conscious, loving, joyful vibration. And as we see ourselves, as we feel ourselves more to be a part of that, then the whole nature of reality begins to shift, and we become subject to the laws of miracles that all of the great masters are able to demonstrate for us. So all of this is a little bit esoteric, but let's come back to something a little bit more practical. How do we become closer to this vibration of God? How do we become closer to the light? As I say, it's a misnomer to say that we draw it or even that we come closer to it. Really, what we should be talking about is how do we become more aware of the fact that that's what we are, that we are made up of light, that we are made up of joy and love. How do we become more aware of the fact that we are extensions of God? That's the real question. And so Master had a very simple answer to this also. We become aware of it very simply by wanting to become aware of it. He said that think of the mind as being made up of countless mental citizens. Let's just, for the sake of something relatively easy, think of your mind having as many mental citizens as there are in the country in which you live. So for most of you, that's Italy. For others, it may be a different country, but it's relatively easy to think of the population of your country. So that's the population of your mind, mental citizens. And so how does your country elect a leader? Everybody votes. And normally, if it's not the US, the leader accepts the fact that they've been either elected or not elected. How do our mental citizens elect a leader? By wanting it, by voting for it. And so if you want to see yourself as a citizen of light, as a channel of light, as a being of light, you simply have to get your mental citizens to want that, to vote for it. And so by this long, slow evolutionary process, you basically go through many lifetimes trying to find happiness. Master said everybody is motivated by trying to find happiness. And you try to find happiness and you check this out, and maybe I'll work hard and I'll get rich because I'm certain that if I'm rich, I'll be happy. And maybe you spend a dozen lifetimes gathering the ability to make money until finally in some lifetime you succeed and you become very wealthy. And you find out that for a little short period of time, that seemed to make you happy. But then, lo and behold, you fell back to the same old patterns in your mind. And it didn't matter whether you were rich or not so rich, you still weren't happy. And so you try this and this and this and this until finally you have evolved spiritually to the point where you say, you know, I have tried just about everything I can think of, but nothing that I try to achieve outside of myself has made me happy. Let me look within. And that brings you to the spiritual path. And then that brings you to guides on the spiritual path, finally techniques on the spiritual path. And in one sense, that whole process is simply about you helping your mental citizens elect your higher being, God or your own soul, to be the leader of your consciousness. And as you gradually elect that, then that becomes really, really central to your life. And if you're on the spiritual path, then Master says, well, if you really want that, here are techniques to help it along. Here's meditation. Here's Hong Sa. Here's Kriya. Here's energization. Here's listening to the sound of Om. Here are all these techniques that will help you to just calm down enough to see that you're already that which you're seeking. You're already God, but you will never be happy or satisfied until you come to the realization that you are already resting in that which you're seeking. And so one might sum up the whole of the spiritual path by saying it's just convincing your mental citizens to choose the light, to choose the knowledge that they already are, that which they seek. And then, as Patanjali said, the seer rests in his own self. At all other times, if you're not resting in your own self, you're mentally disturbed and you're in the realm of vibration and Maya. And so that's kind of internal. But let me end by just talking a bit about another very, very important aspect, and that's sharing the light. When we bought the parcel of land where Swami's home is and where Devi's and my home is, we bought that parcel in part because it had a spring on it, a water spring that we were told that it flowed all year long and that you could draw water from it because in California, the climate is such that we need to irrigate things during the summer. And so you need a water source. And so we bought this because there was a spring on it. But we found out that the law of a spring is that you have to keep that water flowing. You have to keep it open, and you have to take the water from that spring and you have to allow it to go and water plants and trees and flowers. And if you don't, that spring will dry up. It gets clogged up and it stops. And underneath the ground, the water finds another channel to move in. And so it is with us that we have this light within us, but if we don't share it, it's going to dry up, or it will find another channel and we won't have it available to direct the way that we need to. And it's very, very important and central to the way that Ananda has started and how it will continue, is that we share the light. If we stop sharing the light, God's grace, which is like the water in that spring, will dry up. It'll simply go and it'll find another channel. Won't be available to our consciousness until we open up and begin sharing again. And so sharing the light is on many, many different levels. In Seattle, they came up with a kind of this was in helping work with their newer members. They came up with a kind of easily remembered way of doing this, which is, they called it the 5 S's, the letter S. They said that the 5 S's are study, you have to study the teachings; sadhana, you have to incorporate the teachings in your spiritual practice; satsang, which is gathering together with other devotees, just as we're doing now. This is satsang. Service, you have to serve You have to actively offer yourself in service to this light. And then finally, support, which means financial support of the institution of Ananda, because the people of Ananda, the things, there's a monetary cost in sharing. And so with these 5 S's, again, study, sadhana, satsang, service, and support. With those 5 S's, we have the elements that we need in order to continue to share the light. And so Ananda, one might say, not just Ananda, it's the law of God, is that it is built around the fact that this infinite source of light has created us. And at first, we think that we are our own creators. Gradually, that delusion begins to part, and we see that we have been created by God out of his vibration of light. And ultimately, we'll come to the realization that there's nothing else in existence except that light. And that in order for us to, our mental citizens, to hold that high consciousness, we have to then not only daily reconnect to that level of consciousness that remembers who we are, but then we have to share it with others. And it's actually, I don't know, disarmingly simple, these spiritual truths. As Sri Yukteswar said, God is simple, all else is complex. And so the spiritual path is very, very simple. Just calm your mind in sadhana, realize you are that light, and that light is infinite, that light is made up of God, and then share it, serve it, share it, support it, and gather with others who are doing the same thing. And you're all doing that. I mean, you're doing it right now. This whole program is predicated on just exactly that. So it's really, the spiritual path is really very simple, and it increases our level of happiness, our level of joy, our level of health, but most of all, it increases not only our level of light within us, but also the desire and the ability to share that light with the world. And my, if the world could simply begin to do those very simple things, appreciate, share, support, serve, we would live in a paradise. And so we can't say to the whole world, you have to change, but we can say, well, I myself am going to change, and I can create a little island in the sea of madness where these high principles exist and are lived. And we'll create that little island, and we'll call it Ananda. We'll call it after the quality of joy that is God. And so the little islands of Ananda, that you and I are all a part of that island, exist to bring a model of a higher way of living and give hope and strength and promise to the world. And in doing that, we will have lived a life well lived. So Devi and I will be happy to take some questions and move on from there.
So you can either type your questions into the chat box or just take the microphone and ask, speaking English.
We're, we're Vinaya and Julian going to sing now, or at the very
At the
end?
end, I think.
It might be maybe an idea to ask them to sing now so that the translators have 5 minutes break.
Good.
Shall we do that? Okay. So Vinaya and Julian, if you want to try again, what we need to do, all of us, is mute our microphone. And so let's pray that this time what they do comes out better. I live without fear. So all of us, let's mute our microphones.
Okay. Can everybody hear us now? Great. Okay. The green summer fade and winter draw near, my Lord, in your presence I live without fear. Through tempest, through snows, through turbulent tide, the touch of your hand is my strength and my guide. I ask for no riches that death can destroy. I crave only thee, your love and your joy. I ask for no riches that death can destroy. I crave only thee, your love and your joy. The dancers will pass, the singing must end. I welcome the darkness with you for my friend.
Beautiful.
Very, very beautiful.
Thank you. So nice to see you both.
Yes.
You too. Thank you so much.
Voice has remained beautiful.
Yeah. So I saw some could hear well and others not so well, but for Devi and me at least, it was beautiful. We heard beautifully.
So, Darshan,
Yes.
do you want to be kind of the question moderator and just ask us questions that
Yeah.
people have?
Okay. Okay. So Durga, who is our technician, will read them to me, and then I will read them to you.
Okay.
Durga, is there any question that's come in? Not yet. Yeah, if you have any questions, don't be shy, just type them into the chat box and we will, and Jyotish and Devi will be happy to answer. First of all, thank you for this wonderful, really deep, deep inspiration. I think it has helped us all to connect more deeply with the light and with each other and with God. Thank you, the heroes, the translators. There we are, there's a question. Okay.
So it's from Femke. So how can we be an inspiration to the family and friends who are not on the spiritual path, especially in these difficult times? Femke.
Okay, I don't think I need to repeat it.
No.
Do the translators, they've
So
translated?
how can I be an inspiration on the spiritual path for my family and friends who are not on the spiritual path?
Well, first of all, Nice to hear from you, Femke. I wish we were there and we could all be together, but maybe in a few months that's possible. So this is a very common question that naturally we want to share these wonderful teachings with others, especially family members or those who are close who seem to be kind of stuck and maybe they're unhappy. But as Swami has often said, you can't you can't offer something to a person who isn't interested in receiving anything. And so don't try to offer the teachings themselves. Try to offer your own happiness as a model. Try to offer your own sense of contentment, because understand that even though people may be stuck, like that grumpy man with the petrol station that Devi talked about, they may be stuck in a negative space. Nonetheless, somewhere within them, there is a part of them that wants to be happy, that wants to have more light, that wants to be more uplifted in their lives. And so they may, for a wide variety of reasons, resist the particular expression of the teachings that we all are interested in, Yogananda's path. So they may be resistant to that, but they won't be resistant to love or to kindness or to your own happiness. They may even say, oh, well, that's just the way she is. It's not what she does. But gradually, we've seen so many people, often it's parents, who are worried about their children um, getting on the spiritual path, that are resistant. Gradually, over time, the mere model of happiness makes them more open. And they probably won't actually practice these teachings, but they may very well come to accept and appreciate the fact that these teachings are valid and are really helping you.
Yes, I'll just add, um, on a practical level, very much what Jyotish was just talking about. It's curious, but I'm finding that friends of mine from my school days, relatives that I haven't connected with for a long time, are reaching out to us now. I think people are sensing, maybe because we've been following a spiritual path, maybe we have something of value to help them with. And they're not asking for our teachings, but they just want to connect. In fact, yesterday I had a lovely phone conversation with a friend of mine who I've known from, more than 50 years ago, from my high school days. And we just had a lovely conversation. And I didn't tell her anything about, she knows I met Ananda, but I just tried to encourage, I asked, she's an artist. I asked her what she was doing and what kind of art she was doing. And at first she was a little bit tense, but then by the end of the conversation, we were both laughing, and she's saying, oh, let's just stay in touch. And so the point that I'm making here is, if people don't believe our teachings, that doesn't matter. They want to be happy. And if you just try to relate to their higher nature, you will help them. This friend texted me later in the day and said, thank you so much for talking to me. I felt so much better afterwards. And I thought, oh, good. Then I accomplished what I wanted to accomplish. So just, again, share the light, as we've been saying. And you don't have to preach. You don't have to proselytize. But, and I'll just close with this little true story from my life. When I came to Ananda, my parents were not at all happy with that. They wanted me to live a traditional life. But I think at a certain point they saw I wasn't moving away, so they accepted it. But then my mother visited after I had been here for 10 years. Long, but she said the most beautiful thing. She said, we come from a large extended family. I probably have 20 cousins. And she said, you're the only one that did something different, but you're the only one that's happy. And she saw that. And it was true. The others had pursued, material happiness, but it had all dried up for them. So by the example of your own happiness, you can help others. That's the quick answer. Now, I'll just interject here because I saw there was a very good question about health. Bhakti Marg asked, what if someone practices all these teachings and still is ill and they can't seem to overcome it? What advice can you give to them? Well, dear Swami Kriyananda was, again, a role model for this. He was ill for decades. And in fact, I think he was taking on other people's karma, all the devotees' karma. And in fact, once someone asked him, Swamiji, are you taking on other people's karma with your illnesses? And he didn't like to talk about things like that. But after a pause, he said, we all have to do our part. And he was admitting that his part was to be, he had the ability to take on people's bad karma, and he was doing it. But if someone has illness and they can't overcome it through our teachings, physical illness is one thing, turning away from the light is another thing. And even in the most difficult of situations, we've had friends who had terminal illnesses or who are in a great deal of pain or discomfort, but because they lived in the light of God never left their eyes, and we have seen this. And so no, we can't, it isn't all of our karma to be well. More people are going to die from this pandemic in the year ahead. Not all of them, even devotees, will survive, but that's not what's important. What's important is to keep living in the light.
Yeah, just to add briefly on that, we perhaps put too much of an emphasis on physical healing. When I first started, this was many, many years ago, of course, first started praying for people, I would think about the illness that they have and try to send out energy that cured that illness. But after some period of time, sometimes the illness cured, sometimes it didn't, I realized that that wasn't really the best way to pray. I began then to pray that Divine Mother, in her infinite wisdom, send the energy of physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual healing to that person. And let Divine Mother decide, because very often illness has to do with working out some sort of past karma. And trying to fix the outer part doesn't fix the inner part. And so I began to see that, well, I don't know, a relatively small percentage of people were healed on a physical level. A large percentage of people became more accepting of whatever was happening, more able to work with it, more appreciative of God. So on mental levels, a lot of healing was taking place. And Master's teachings is that the physical body ultimately follows the thought patterns. And so the fact that people were working on it internally with their consciousness was actually more important than whether it had yet expressed itself on a physical level or not. And so just trust in the intelligent flow of life force, and that you can, by your goodwill, by your concentration, by your prayers, help send that life force to people, just as you can, in energization, send life force into your hand or your foot. You can send that same life force through your thoughts to other people to help them heal. There's also a question I saw that I'll go on. How do we help large numbers of people? It seems overwhelming. There are so many people in need. Well, it isn't your responsibility to fix the world. That's God's responsibility. But it's your responsibility to put out whatever light you can put out. And that light will reach out according, if you have a tiny little bulb like on a torch or a flashlight, it'll only reach so far. But if you have a big searchlight, then that can light up a whole area. And so worry about you putting out light. Don't worry about how far it reaches or how many it helps see their way. That's not your responsibility, but your responsibility is to do the very best that you can do and leave the rest up to God.
There's so many good questions. I don't think we'll get to answer all of them, but one that caught my eye was, how do we work without us? How do we overcome a sense of guilt and unworthiness, that we're not worthy to be on the spiritual path? Well, again, Swami gave us some very good advice. He said, everything that makes you feel diminished, that makes you feel not good about yourself, remember that that is from the darkness. That is from Satan, is how he put it. And that which makes you feel good about yourself is the light within you. So when you start feeling, oh, I'm not worthy to be on the path, I've made all these mistakes, you know, that's just the darkness trying to obstruct your spiritual freedom. And just say, get thee behind me, Satan. Yes, maybe I've made many mistakes, but that does not define who I am. What defines who I am is my sincere desire to know God and my sincere love of God. And so everyone is worthy to be on the path. Why? Because that's our common destiny. That's human beings. God created us in order that we might reunite with him. And there will be that great moment of rejoicing when our individual soul is reunited with God. So anything that blocks that, you just put behind you. Even the worst of sinners, as we said earlier from the Bhagavad Gita, by steadfast meditation on me, speedily comes to me. So so often people come to us with that question, oh, I've led a bad life, I've done many bad things. Do not let that define you, but just move forward and say, I will reclaim, yes, maybe I have done bad things, but I will reclaim myself like the prodigal son. Such a powerful allegory of God welcoming us when we return.
Darshan, more questions are coming in. Do you want to choose some, or should we just...
Maybe there was one question in Italian, and so we can translate it so we can also see what people say. Can you read it in Italian? I'll translate it. Okay.
Okay. Which one shall we choose? This one? Questo? Ok. So.
Devo leggere però.
Sì, sì.
Non leggo.
Leggilo in italiano. Che...
Quale pratica?
Quale pratica utilizzate per rimanere centrati durante il lavoro e la vita quotidiana in famiglia?
Is there any specific technique that you use to stay centered in your daily life, in your work, and when you're surrounded by your family members?
Well, I'll give our kind of daily routine. First of all, we always energize and we always meditate basically right when we get up in the morning. So that gets us centered. And we also do that in the evening. And so the two ends of the day keep us centered. Then during the uh, activity of the day, whatever it is, I try to remember Master as often as possible because that's my connection. And I try to actively ask him, if I'm struggling with something. For instance, I'm writing a blog right now for this Friday. So I'm trying to finish one of the weekly touches of light. Well, a couple of times in that, I asked Master, how should I say this? How should I express this? Or is there something else that I should say? So consciously bringing him to mind and asking him in any way that you can, I try to keep little connections throughout the day with Master. And then for the rest, I basically try to be kind and helpful and supportive and do what I can to help others. Keep my mind positive and not thinking about myself, thinking about God or thinking about other people. And in that, my mind stays uplifted.
I'll just briefly share. Um, it's not very different, but this may be helpful to everyone. Someone was telling me about, in fact, I read an article written by a dance teacher. And she said, one of the things she said, dancing, to be a professional dancer, and I think this is true of martial arts as well, you need to be constantly making fine, minute adjustments. And so one of the things this dance teacher does is she'll take one student in her class and she'll have the other students just throw themselves trying to knock the person off balance. And some people never are able to adapt. They just get thrown to the floor. But she said she had one student who was the smallest one in the class, but she understood that to maintain her balance, she had to make minute little adjustments all the time. So how does this apply to our spiritual life? As you go through the day, after you meditate, your mind is more focused on God. And then when you feel it's starting to get off, somebody has said something unkind or a big problem has come up, before it throws you off balance and crashes you to the floor, make that little adjustment mentally, emotionally, spiritually. No, I am centered in God, and return to that center. And if you do that throughout the day, then you're always balanced. You're always in the light. But it takes those little micro adjustments all the time, like, oh, I'm getting tense now. Why am I getting tense? I don't need to be. Everything's going to be fine. And then that you just sail through the day with a lot more equanimity and joy. Now, Darshan, it's
I'll just add one thought to that constantly during the day, there are things trying to bump into us and throw us off balance. And if you really look at it, there is a little period of time, sometimes it's only a second or two, between the stimulus and your reaction to it. And if you take that very small time to teach yourself that you have a choice of how you react to this, that you then begin to gain control. Whereas if it's simply stimulus and uh, stimulus and response, you don't have that choice. So learn to take control very quickly. When they try to throw you off balance, you only have a second or two to make that little minute adjustment. But if you do, then you're going to be able to control it.
Well, there's so many wonderful questions, and we do apologize. I think we should probably be ending. It's getting late for you, and this was.
Hey, Mike. So, yes, do we have them? Yeah. So thank you once more for this wonderful opportunity to be together with you and share this, for you for sharing this inspiration. And I really hope that we can all be here sometime in this temple when you come. All the people are present here now. Let's make a bet and let's try to be here all when Jyotish and Devi are able to come here. We've been like between 220 and 250. And so there will be room for everyone. So let's hope we can see each other all together here this summer, and otherwise we will be connected in some other way. So thank you really on behalf of this community, of our spiritual directors, Kirtani and Anand, on behalf of the whole European Sangha, for everything you've been sharing now and all the time. Thank you with all our hearts. And let's finish by listening to the choir of Ananda Sisi singing the song that has the title of this satsang, Thy Light Within Us Shining. Thank you.
Thank you all. Send our love in God and Guru.
God bless you.
Thank you again, and also thanks to the translators and to Durga, who's been our technical support. See you all very, very soon. Jai Guru. Thank you.
Jai Guru.
Okay. I don't know what's happening. Close.